financial argument. Follow us on YouTube.
Have a very, very important guest today. He's the keynote speaker at many conferences. He wrote the original book on the deep state. Anyone who has researched the Federal Reserve, gold, the history of the banking system, they've absolutely come across G. Edward Griffin, the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island. He also runs a website called freedomforceinternational.org. Our guest today will go over the deep state, the economics behind the what we're actually seeing, and of course all the manipulation and the fraud that goes involved in our economy. And I'm very, very, very lucky to have him on the show today. A wealth of knowledge. He's been on every radio show you can imagine, including Coast to Coast AM a few times. I've seen him at the KC conference myself. Real pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Griffin.
Well, thank you. It is a pleasure for me to be here.
Well, sir, our audience is definitely interested in personal finance. There's a little bent on people who like gold ownership, kind of that libertarian bent. And I wanted to start off with what's going on in D.C. because you wrote the original book on the deep state, which is The Creature from Jekyll Island. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on this entire fiasco in the sense that you have some very, very strong forces trying to overthrow an elected president, whether that's the media or members of Congress or outside forces or generals? What are your thoughts of how the first 6 months of President Trump's term has played out here?
Well, it's a good question. And, I guess the answer to that depends on one's mood at the moment the issue comes up. Right now, I'm sitting here feeling rather content and looking out my window at the sun shining and thinking how beautiful the trees and the sky and the clouds are. So I'm not filled with all the anxiety that usually builds up toward the end of the day after I've dealt with the news. But so in my present mood, I'm inclined to just say, well, it's just more of the same, which it is, of course. But that underestimates or understates the severity of the problem. When I say it's more of the same, is that I don't think that much has changed. Just because of the election, it appears that much has changed, and we have a new president, of course, and this president appears not to be part of the establishment. He's doing everything to rile the establishment, and the establishment is kind of another word for the deep state. There are layers to the establishment, but if you get to the control layer, we might call that the deep state. But anyway, he's upset the deep state or the establishment or the status quo, however you want to describe it. And he's getting a lot of pushback. And so that's what dominates the news, all the conflict, the differences, the demonstrations, the different ploys to try and discredit the president, to try and prepare the public to accept some kind of a coup d'etat or some kind of drastic measure, possibly even an assassination. You never know. But the idea is to prepare the public opinion to possibly say, oh, well, I guess it's a terrible thing, but after all, I can understand why he's probably deserved it. It's kind of what they did, at Ruby Ridge. When they killed those poor people up there in the hills, they tried to make them look like they were weirdos. And the Branch Davidians, when they annihilated that group, they tried to demonize them so that they could then do anything they wanted to them, and people would say, "Oh, well, they deserved it." You recognize the pattern, and this is the pattern we're in. It's definitely a softening up of public opinion to be prepared to accept something really bad down the line. Now, I hope I'm wrong in that analysis, but we've seen this pattern so many times that we have to consider that is a possibility. But when I raise the question about the appearance versus the reality of a change, and we have to keep in mind that well, how do I say this? I don't want to get into trouble with all the Trump supporters because I am a Trump supporter myself, but I don't consider myself to be a blind Trump supporter. Um, we know that when Mr. Trump was campaigning, early in the campaign, he did an amazing thing that appeared in the press just like a little blip, and then it was never mentioned again. And that is that he had a private meeting with Henry Kissinger. And it actually appeared, not on the front page, of course, but it was in the back pages of, I think, New York Times or something. So he met with Kissinger. Oh, big deal. And then he's gone. Well, why on earth would a candidate for president meet with Henry Kissinger, who everyone knows or should know is really you might say, the unofficial ambassador for the Rockefeller family? When you talk about Kissinger, you're talking about Rockefeller. When Rockefeller wants to deliver a message, he doesn't do it personally. If it's a very important message, he does it through Henry Kissinger. So why would Trump do that? And of course, you can say, well, he was just trying to cover his bases. Maybe it was just a political thing to do. But Mr. Trump also told us early on that he was a deal maker. He's boasted about being good at making deals. And he's also told us that he can work with anybody. This is one of his major themes when he first announced for the candidacy to be president. He said, I work with both sides. I work with the Republicans. I work with the Democrats. I work with any nation. I cut deals. I know how to make things happen. Kind of reminded me of Mussolini's campaign. He said, I make things happen. I'll make those trains run. Don't ask me about theory or ideology or principles. I just make things happen. So we were really warned and have been rewarned over and over again that Mr. Trump makes deals. So, and he met with Mr. Kissinger, meaning the Rockefeller dynasty and all their political influence. And now we're talking about the deep state. So now, since then, we see people that I have been describing in my newsletter as more or less moles in the Trump administration. Guys like Sessions, and Comey, and all these people where do they come from? They're appointed by President Trump to be his key figures in his cabinet and his, the Attorney General and people like that, FBI and CIA, and they turn out to be old deep state people. They're actually, some of them are very close, known to be Clinton loyalists. And so why would Trump appoint these people? And my question is that could it be that he is keeping a campaign promise? And the campaign promise was to allow Kissinger or his people to name prominent positions, people to fill prominent positions in the administration. And that's the deal in order to get the support of the deep state to allow Trump to be elected. And so then he could be attacked and knocked out of office, you see, and nothing will change. And that's just a theory. That you might call that a conspiracy theory if you wish, but it's something, when you've been around the block so many times and you've seen scenarios like this play out, it's something that you have to consider. And I consider it a lot, and especially lately, we see that these deep state people and their representatives are popping up like mushrooms after a summer rainstorm. They're everywhere, and they're just coming up through the grass. And you think, my gosh, they've always been there, but we just didn't notice them. Now we see that they are there, and there are lots of them, and they're everywhere, and they're particularly in high positions. So that's my feeling this morning, and that's my optimistic observation, by the way, as I sit here looking here at the trees and the sky and the clouds. Ask me later in the day, I might have a real serious analysis to present.
I know some have some mutual friends that know Trump and have helped Trump, and I'm just curious, are you surprised that Trump took ownership of the stock market the way he did? Because when he was candidate Trump, he talked about it being a big fat bubble. He talked about the Federal Reserve having rates too low. He talked about wanting to fire Yellen. And now maybe this goes back to this theory with Kissinger, but now it looks like he might not get rid of Yellen. It's kind of up in the air. He is not saying a word about rates. and he's completely taken ownership of a highly, highly inflated, manipulated stock market.
Yeah, well, that's part of the analysis really that I was describing. All of the really, really important things. Uh, to me, the most important things to our country right now are issues that relate to foreign policy, our national sovereignty, for example, even. Yeah, nobody talks about that. And issues that relate to our monetary system. Those are the two things that are the heartbeat of America, the money and our identity as a nation, our national, it's not just our national security against military forces. We spend a lot of money on that, um, not necessarily used for our national security, by the way, but that's the excuse for it. But what are we doing about our national security against political invasion and erosion? You know, what we're not even looking in that direction, and that's really where the threat lies. So I've noticed that for as long as I've been aware of these things, which takes me back to 1960, believe it or not. I'm older than dirt, but but for as long as I can remember, those two issues, national sovereignty, our identity as an independent nation versus being engulfed into the United Nations and world government and all that sort of thing. That's one issue. And the other is our money system, who creates our money, the Federal Reserve System, our purchasing power, all of those things. Those are the two issues that never, ever is discussed in the political campaigns. It's off limits to both political parties. And that was one of the clues to me in the beginning that there's something fishy about this two-party system, when the most important issues of all are off limits and everybody obediently follows the rules. Nobody talks about them, including, well, Mr. Trump. He did in the beginning, but now we see he's falling back to the traditional line that, okay, everything is okay. We're not going to change anything. We'll maybe complain and grumble a little bit and move the deck chairs around on the Titanic a little bit, but we're not going to change anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Bernanke being picked by Bush and Obama, even though they're supposed to be these very, very different people, presidents. With the Fed, I wanted to ask you, you are the world's expert on the Federal Reserve. Again, everybody, author of The Creature from Jekyll Island. This is the greatest story that most people haven't heard of how the creation of the Fed. What is the state of the Federal Reserve right now? Because you've got a situation, and Greenspan actually brought it up yesterday, where he's like, I've got a chart that goes back to 1800, and this right now sticks out. You've got negative interest rates, so it's kind of the first time, I guess, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, first time in banking history where you have a guaranteed default. If you're getting less than you were paid back, that's a default. So first time in banking history that there's a guaranteed default. You've got Ben Bernanke saying that we won't see normalization of rates in his lifetime, and he's not that old of a guy. So what is the state of the Federal Reserve right now?
Well, I called it a creature when I wrote the book, and that was published in 1994. It's a creature. It's an entity. It's not a natural thing. Most people think that the Federal Reserve is a government agency. Well, it's not. It's a corporation. It's a corporation that was chartered by the federal government instead of the states. Normally, corporations are chartered by the states, but some of them are chartered by the federal government, and this is one of them. So it's a corporation, and it's kind of a hybrid organization. It has some characteristics of government and some characteristics of a private corporation, but it's really a hybrid, and it's neither a pure private corporation or a pure government entity. But it is, you can identify the fact that it is independent of government. That's one of the reasons for it being created in the first place, is supposedly it was sold to the American people as we got to get away from politics. You see, we have to. This is too important. The monetary system is too important to be governed by the passions of politics. different parties in and out. And so the money system has to be stable, can't be subjected to these booms and busts and so forth. And that was the argument, of course. And the argument is sound, but the solution they were offering does not do what they were saying. In fact, it was just doing the reverse. It was it was insulating it from all the passions of politics, but it certainly didn't insulate it from the passions of private manipulation, you see. So anyway, that's this little side note on it. So the structure is a creature. It's a hybrid, and it allows the private banking cartel. That's really what it is. It's a cartel, and most people don't realize it. But you look at the structure, and it's a cartel of the biggest private banks in America that have joined together for the purpose of what all cartels do, and that is to control their own industry, prevent competition, and make sure that their profit margins are nice and secure, and all that sort of thing. It's a way of escaping competition. So that's what the Federal Reserve is a banking cartel, no different than a banana cartel or oil cartel. This happens to be a banking cartel. Well, okay, having said that, then you come back to your question. Well, what's the state of the cartel today? Well, the state is that it's bigger and more powerful and more influential than ever. And it keeps growing like any parasite would keep growing. And I think the parasite analogy is good, because with most parasites, they grow and prosper and continue to grow until finally they destroy the host. They kill the host, and then the parasite dies too. Well, we've seen this happen in history. Monetary cartels like this have occurred many times in history. In fact, that's the norm. We only had true private enterprise, free enterprise banking, only had that in a very small period of history, and it was in Scotland of all places. It never existed before. So the history of banking cartels is quite rich and deep, and they always destroy or they do destroy the economic basis of a nation, causing a reshuffling, a sort of a monetary revolution, if you will, and it destroys the host. And we're on that track right now. So I think that we're getting really close to that point where the host is wobbling, it's staggering under the load, and it could happen at any moment that the host, meaning our economy, will just fall to its knees. Well, these people know that. They're anticipating that. They're not stupid. And they're maneuvering now to create a new monetary system very similar to the old, but it'll be international in scope. And they're talking about an international money system. They always have been talking about it, but now they're really talking about it as coming very, very soon. And they're putting in place the mechanisms and the structures to be able to make the transition very much in our lifetime. I'm expecting I'm thinking that their goals and their timetables are definitely within the next few years. That's what it seems like to me.
So this would be something post individual nation state currency, something perhaps like an SDR or a euro that would be global instead of having the US dollar?
Absolutely correct, yes. And of course, the plan always has been to reach that goal, but the strategy has been to do it in stages, not in one big step. The idea is that people value their national currencies. As long as they think nationalistically, they want to see money with the name of their country on it. You know, we want an American dollar, not a dollar with some international symbol. Well, they just know that it takes time to condition people's thinking to accept a money that no longer has the name of their nation on it, no longer has pictures of their national heroes on it, and has some kind of international or meaningless symbol, you know, that doesn't involve nationality. It takes time. And so they designed the process to go through steps, that there would be regional currencies like the euro, for example. That's a regional currency. And then after the regional currency is established, then they figure they can get all the regional currencies to finally merge into one international currency, which possibly will be called the Bancor. That's what they've been using that name for a long time. They have on the drawing boards an Amero for North America. That'd be the United States, Canada, and Mexico. They've been preparing for the Amero to function very much like the euro does in Europe. But now it's beginning to look, as the economy gets wobblier and weaker, that they may just bypass the AMRO and go right for the Bancor. These things are still under discussion, but the trend is definite and the process is moving.
What is the infatuation or role in the stock market with the Federal Reserve and other central banks? Because it's been disclosed now that you got the Swiss central bank printing money out of thin air and buying stocks. You've got the Norwegian one. Everybody's assumed the Fed's been doing it for a long time. We already know they buy each other's bonds. I mean, it's such a Ponzi scheme when anybody steps back and goes, "Oh my gosh, they're printing each other's currency to buy each other's bonds, and now they're buying stocks." Let me ask you this: is the Fed married to the stock market? Because a lot of people buy stocks, assuming that they won't let it get that bad because the Fed will come in and save the day.
Well, I think there are a lot of things at work in that issue. I don't think the Fed is married to the stock market, but they certainly know how the stock market can be used as a tool in this management of the monetary system. Because one of the things happens when you have a fiat money that is constantly losing its value, people finally wake up to that and they start looking around for a savings mechanism that they can put their hard-earned wealth into, if they have any, that will protect them from the inflation phenomenon. And so traditionally, that's always been gold and silver. Well, the Fed and all central banks, all banks hate gold and silver with a passion, because if you base a money system on gold and silver, then that limits the quantity of the money that you can have. It's limited by the amount of gold and silver, obviously. And if you have a limited quantity of money, that means the banks cannot make these huge loans. They cannot loan any money that doesn't already exist in the form of gold or silver. Well, if the banks have limitations on how much money they can loan, then they have serious limitations on how much interest they can earn on loans. And that seriously cuts into their revenue. That's why banks hate gold and silver or any kind of a limited money supply, because it cuts into their potential profit of being able to loan money created out of nothing. If you create money out of nothing and loan it out, you don't have to charge a lot of interest on it to show a profit. And that's basically the trick. If you boil it right down to the scum on the inside of the pot, it's creating money out of nothing and then collecting interest on nothing. So getting back to the main issue, how does this relate to the stock market? Well, when you're taking away the option for people to have a savings in gold or silver or something that holds its purchasing power, you have to give them something that they can look at and say, well, this is where I'm going to put my savings. And the stock market is it. So people think that, well, I can put my savings into the stock market and the stock market will always go up to overcome this inflationary effect. And so if you're playing that game and you happen to be the deep state or the deep financial state, at least, you want to make sure that this stock market does always go up, so it will not disappoint people's expectations. So you make sure that the prices of stock just keeps going up and up. It's more or less to match inflation, and that makes everybody happy. They're not really anxious anymore to go back to gold or silver.
Last question. I want to end us on a positive note, especially as you're looking at a beautiful sunny day as you do this interview. Close us out on something that you are personally looking at, which is cause for a little optimism. Whether it's what's going on in the White House, perhaps some key people that Trump maybe has gotten that are good guys, or maybe it's the cryptocurrencies. Wherever you want to take us, what is something that when you look at the cartel and the stranglehold it has on this world, is there anything out there that gives you a little optimism?
That's a great question, because there are a lot of things like that. And when we get on these issues, it's so easy to overlook those things and just talk about the dark clouds. But yeah, I think you mentioned a couple of them. People's interest in cryptocurrencies is very encouraging. Although some of most of the cryptocurrencies are really not not good in terms of that money replacement for gold or silver, because there's nothing of intrinsic value to them, and they could just disappear overnight. The internet could go down, and there's your money supply, for example. You can't put any cryptocurrency in your mattress or bury it in a tin can in your backyard. And when the when the lights go out and the power goes down, or the government pulls the switch on the internet, whatever, then there goes your currency. So it cannot really be looked to as a honorable replacement for a real money supply based on some commodity which has intrinsic value even if it weren't used as money. But it has a lot of other values in terms of escaping the banking system for the little nibble, that bite transaction fee on every financial transaction that takes place in the world. It also allows people to have privacy with their transactions, which I think is much more important than most people realize. And a lot of things like that. And it particularly gets people thinking about the weaknesses of the present monetary system. All of those things are good. Everything starts first in the brain. You have to realize you have a problem before you can think about a solution to the problem. So I love cryptocurrencies for all of those reasons, even though I would never be hotly in favor of trying to make them serve as a currency. They're good for transactions, purchase transactions online and so forth. But I would say it's only good for that. As soon as if you make money, a profit on a transaction, I would recommend you take it out of cryptocurrencies and put it into gold or silver, so that now, okay, it's really safe. It's a good savings source. All right, so that's a very positive thing, and it gets people talking about these issues. And the other thing is that, getting back to Trump, regardless of all of the things you might dislike about Mr. Trump, you have to admire the fact that he's taken on the Goliath, and I guess it would take some kind of a strong ego, I dare use the word, to stand against all of this force that's coming after them. I wonder how many people could stay in the White House and just stick their chins out and say, yeah, well, you can say that if you wish, but here's what I'm going to do. A lot of people would say, oh, wow, my goodness, nobody likes me anymore. I'm not loved. And they would say, I quit, I resign, So I have to admire that. And the fact that somebody is standing and saying, I'm not going for this political correctness anymore, has sort of made it more popular and acceptable for millions and millions of people who feel the same way. But now they have the courage to stand up and say, me too. They might not have been the first ones to do something, but they're easy to be the second ones, you see. So I think we're seeing a groundswell of gumption, you might say, coming up simply because it's now someone else has done it, and so the second wave is always a little bit easier. I think that's an encouraging sign. We need to stand against this stupid political correctness, and not stupid. It's horrific. It's destructive, actually. So I'm very encouraged by that. And then within my own sphere, we've had great success with something called the Red Pill Expo, and we're now forming the Red Pill University. And it's bringing people out of the woodwork from all over the world. We just completed a Red Pill Expo 2 months ago in Bozeman, Montana, of all places. And people came from all around the world, from France, from India, from Iran, even from Mexico, from Canada. I think we had 12 countries represented there. And people spent some pretty good money and a lot of time to come just to find common cause with each other. A lot of differences of opinion. We come from different cultures, different languages, all different economic status, different genders, different age groups. All of these things are different religions, and yet they all came together to find out. The slogan is because you know something is wrong. They came out to find out, well, what's your opinion about what is wrong? Well, here's my opinion. And out of that has come the early stages of a magnificent coalition of freedom-loving people from all around the world. And we've just started. I'm very encouraged.
Where can people get more information on that? Where's the next event, and how do you sign up to learn more about it?
Okay, great question. Thanks for that. I'm supposed to bring that up. Yeah, well, yeah, the best place to come would be redpillexpo.org. Redpillexpo.org.
Okay, we'll definitely have that up on the description.
And the other thing is that this is sponsored by an organization that I created, which is freedomforceinternational.org. So you find the information there also, plus a lot of other information as to why the Red Pill Expo was created and what its goals are, and a lot of things about the issues we're discussing today. So that is freedomforceinternational.org.
Well, I'll do everything I can to make the next one. Again, everybody, freedomforceinternational.org, redpill.org. Was it Red Pill and there was something else?
Well, it's Red Pill Expo.
Redpillexpo.org. Definitely everybody check that out. Again, G. Edward Griffin, you've done so much for the great awakening that's happened in the last 20 years here, especially, in the last 10 years since